By Carol, 28 Chapter 1, Dawn at the Threshold. The early light barely pressed through my curtains when I awoke. My bedroom was cool, touched by the breath of spring, and still held the quiet tension of unshaped hours. I sat up slowly, the scent of frankincense from last night's preparation still clinging to the air like a lingering memory. I had arranged everything meticulously the evening before, my brass layman polished to a golden shine, the blue cloth laid flat across my wooden altar, the name of Sachiel carefully etched in gold ink on parchment. At 28, I had performed many rituals, but invoking Jupiter felt different, more consequential. With the sun not yet fully risen, I whispered the names of the angels associated with Jupiter, feeling their syllables vibrate through my chest. A sense of serenity, wide and generous, began to spread through my body. The day had not even begun, and already it bowed to the light. Chapter 2. Consecration of the room. I turned slowly, my bare feet brushing against the smooth floor as I took my wand in hand. Though this was the same bedroom where I had slept, for the past 2 years it was no longer a place of rest. It had become a chamber of invocation. I anointed the 4 corners with oil of cedar and softly recited the psalms associated with Jupiter's benefic influence. The purple candle at the center of my altar flickered as if acknowledging the words. Outside, a morning breeze whispered through the trees, but inside, time felt held in suspension. My voice, trained through months of dedicated practice, was both a key and a bridge. As I faced the southwest, where Sachiel's influence gathers, strongest, I called out his name with measured authority. The light changed subtly, not the sun, something else, a presence. The atmosphere thickened with promise, and I knew the current of prosperity had entered my home. Chapter 3. The sigil and the scent. I traced Sachiel's sigil once more with a brass stylus, reaffirming the geometry of connection between this world and the Jovian sphere. The parchment seemed to pulse subtly under my hand, not an illusion, but the vibration of sympathetic resonance. From a small vessel of blue glass, I poured a blend of frankincense, cedar, and clove onto the heated censer. The smoke rose in slow, spiraling coils, spreading sweetness and power through my bedroom. The smell anchored me to both this place and the realm I was invoking, the lush domain of wise rulership, of thunder and gold. As the fumes wrapped around me, I recited the conjuration I had memorized from the grimoires, calling upon the spirits of Thursday. The words did not feel like mine. They were older, echoing through my chest like thunder beyond distant hills. Chapter 4. The response in stillness. The light in the crystal on my altar shifted, first subtly, then unmistakably. A flicker of blue within the quartz became a slow burning star. The air cooled and then thickened, like being submerged in a sacred tide. I felt the unmistakable presence of divine order, not constraint but magnanimous structure. My thoughts, often racing with the anxieties of a 28-year-old still finding her path in the world, fell into rhythm, like the steady beat of a ceremonial drum. And then came the pressure behind my eyes, the sign that contact was imminent. No apparition manifested, only the heavy golden silence of attention. I breathed through the awe, resisting the urge to speak prematurely. In that moment, I remembered what my teachers had warned. To speak out of turn is to dissolve the link. So I waited, and I listened as a warmth touched my right shoulder like the hand of a benevolent elder. Chapter 5. The Voice of Prosperity. Low hum stirred in the room, not heard by the ears but felt in the bones. I closed my eyes and saw it, a radiance shaped like a figure robed in blue and violet, crowned in shifting light. Sachiel's form did not walk, he emanated. The scepter he held was not for battle, but for bestowing equilibrium. His voice, when it came, rang through my mind like the toll of a bell underwater, deep, solemn, and strangely joyful. The seeds of order bear fruit in stillness, he said. and generosity is the echo of the divine. I asked for wisdom in managing both material and spiritual wealth, for guidance in my career that had stalled despite my education and efforts. He answered not with guarantees, but with a vision, a scale held between the heart and the hand. The message was clear: balance sustains the flow of abundance. Chapter 6. Offerings and oaths. He offered wine in my chalice of silver and bread on a small plate of brass, placing them carefully beside the sigil on the altar. These simple elements, symbols of Jupiter's plenty, shimmered faintly under the candle's flame. I bowed my head and gave thanks, not as a beggar, but as one in covenant. I promised to use what would be given not for hoarding, but for healing and uplift. The air shimmered with approval. The incense flared momentarily, and I took that as the spirit's assent. In that sacred space, my bedroom transformed into a holy court. I made my vow to remember that prosperity without gratitude becomes a curse, and that light, to remain light, must be shared. My chest ached with reverence, and as the presence began to recede, I whispered words not from any grimoire, but from my soul. Let me walk always in the echo of this brightness. Chapter 7. Closing the circle with dignity, the crystal's glow began to fade, not with loss, but with fulfillment. I could sense that the work had been accepted. The air returned to stillness, yet not the same stillness as before. It was a stillness saturated with meaning. With care, I extinguished the incense and lowered the candle's flame using a consecrated snuffer, never blowing it out, never dispelling the light with breath. I reversed the sigil and folded the parchment inward, sealing the moment in sacred containment. The tools were touched one by one with gratitude, then returned to their resting places. As I traced the circle counterclockwise with the wand, dismissing the forces with the proper license to depart, I felt a subtle cooling on my skin, like wind retreating from a sail. The temple dissolved, but the current remained. Chapter 8. Walking among the consequences, I stepped outside the bedroom and into the hallway of my small apartment, where the mundane world lay waiting. Yet everything felt changed. The light seemed sharper, the walls somehow quieter. My feet, though bare, carried a weightless certainty. That morning, messages arrived bearing good news. A job application I had almost forgotten about requested an interview. A friend offered an unexpected opportunity to collaborate on a project that aligned perfectly with my skills. And more than this, I noticed how others responded to my presence that day, with openness, calm, and even unexpected kindness. These were not coincidences. They were the external ripples of an internal alignment. Prosperity, I realized, was not merely material. It was the state of walking with clarity under a benevolent sky. Chapter 9. Signs and omens. Later that day, I took a solitary walk through the park near my apartment. The sky above was painted in hues of soft gold, as if Jupiter himself had lingered in the clouds. A flock of birds passed overhead in a perfect arc, 7 in number. I paused, recognizing the synchronicity. I recalled the ancient texts. The spirits of Jupiter make themselves known in patterns of generosity and law. As I moved through the neighborhood, the world responded as though the veil between realms was thinner. A stranger greeted me with unusual warmth. An opportunity I had long abandoned as lost re-emerged in an unexpected email. The sigil of Satiel flickered in my memory, overlaid on the shapes of trees and buildings like a watermark. These were not fantasies born from a 28-year-old's desperate wish for meaning. They were confirmations. Jupiter was not done speaking. Chapter X. The golden thread of continuity. That evening, I returned to my room, now aired and quiet. Once more. I didn't light the incense this time. I didn't need to. The current was still there, humming just beneath the fabric of the physical. I sat before the altar, eyes closed, and meditated on the impressions of the day. I understood now. Invoking the light of Jupiter was not about summoning spectacle, but about establishing resonance. It was a discipline, a conscious weaving of the sacred into the daily. I wrote in my ritual journal, recording not only what had occurred, but how I had felt. Clear, brave, still, empowered. Not everything in my life had changed, but something within me had. And that something would shape everything else. Chapter seemed the mirror of memory. As night descended, I lit only a single blue candle and opened my Liber Spirituum to a blank page. The Book of Spirits, consecrated on my 28th birthday, 3 months earlier, was not just for recording, it was a witness. I carefully inscribed the seal of Sachiel, adding the date, planetary hour, and a brief account of the operation. Each word was chosen with care, for this was not a diary. It was a magical ledger, a record in the subtle world. As I wrote, I felt a tingle in the base of my skull, a sign familiar by now. Presence. Not overwhelming, but observant. I paused and looked into the mirror I keep beside the altar. For a moment I did not see my own face, my brown eyes and the small scar above my right eyebrow, but something brighter behind it, my own reflection woven with a thread of celestial gold. Chapter 13. Rebalancing the mundane. The next day brought small trials, traffic delays, a tense phone call from my mother, a moment of fatigue. But I met them all with an inner spaciousness I hadn't known before. I saw clearly how easily one could fall out of alignment. Jupiter's gifts are not given blindly, they require stewardship. I adjusted my tone, I slowed my breath, I remembered the ritual, and with each return to the center, the current returned to me. I kept the sigil close, folded in a pocket near my heart, not as a charm, but as a compass. That day I gave more than I received. I volunteered an hour at the community garden. I helped a colleague with a project. And yet strangely, I felt richer. This was the secret Sachiel had whispered behind his thunderous silence. True prosperity is what overflows without loss. Chapter 3. The expansion. Within in the quiet hours before sleep, I reflected on what had truly changed. My room looked the same. The books on shelves, the curtains framing the window, the faint scent of oil on the altar. But the space within me had expanded. I found myself thinking differently, moving through thoughts like walking through a spacious temple. No longer was I chasing prosperity in that anxious way that had defined my mid-20s. I was embodying it. This inner growth came not as a gift unearned, but as a fruit of discipline, invocation, and trust. I whispered a short prayer, not of petition, but of affirmation. Let thy benevolence, O Sachiel, shape me into a vessel of wise increase. The candle flickered once, and I knew the line had not been severed. It was a covenant now, woven into breath and blood. Chapter the 14th. Echoes across the days, in the days that followed. Small confirmations continued. A letter of praise from a potential employer. Unexpected savings on a necessary purchase. A moment of deep peace in the middle of a busy street. None of them dramatic, but all bearing the unmistakable fingerprint of order and benevolence. Jupiter's light does not always arrive as lightning. It often comes as architecture, structure, grace, slow unfolding. I came to see that invoking the light of Jupiter was not just an act of ritual. It was the shaping of a life aligned with higher principles. And so, I began planning my next working, not as an escape from life, but as an ascent within it. The circle, once drawn, had become a spiral, ever widening. Chapter 15. The gate remains open on the 7th morning after the ritual. I stood in the doorway of my room before entering. The threshold now felt like more than wood and paint. It was a line between the mundane and the sacred. I stepped inside not as one entering a place, but as one re-entering a temple. The tools had been returned to storage, yet the charge lingered. I knew now that the ritual had not ended. It had simply changed form. The light of Jupiter continued, to shine not always visibly, but as a presence that altered how I spoke, decided, moved, gave. At 28, I had performed many rituals before, but this one had transformed me. I did not need to repeat the conjuration to feel his guidance. The gate had been carved within me, and so, when I sat once more to meditate, I did so with a quiet smile. The work had begun anew, and I, Carol, had been forever changed. Have you ever tried calling upon a planetary force from within your own home? What happened? Share your experiences in the comments.